City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded August 12, 2024.
We'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Roll, please.
Yep, I'll take the roll. Broderick.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
Keemer.
Here.
Morrow.
Aye. Here.
Shuda.
Here.
5 present.
All right, thank you. First item on the agenda is the presentation of the 2023 financial statement audit report.
Yes, so online we have Justin Hoagland from Baker Tilly, who spearheads our audit, and he's going to take us through the financial statement presentation. This was also included in your packet as well.
Thank you, Corey, and thanks for having me here tonight. I think, Corey, you said that everyone has this in front of them, right, in their packets. You don't need me to, share my screen or anything like that.
Does anybody? Oh, sorry.
Is there anyone that wants him to put it on the screen, or do you all have it in front of you?
People on the video.
It might be.
It might be nice for the people at home.
Okay. Yeah. Let me just share my screen here, as long as I have the powers to do so.
Do you? If not, I may have to turn over hosting to it.
It's disabled. So if you want me to
Try that.
Oh, there's the powers.
There you go, the powers that be.
Power. The power.
I've got
The power.
All right. Can everyone see that?
Barely.
No.
Can you bring it up to full page, maybe?
Yeah, I'm actually going to talk about a different one here first, but
Yeah. Much
zoom in
better.
a little bit. Well, so hopefully everyone can see that. Again, thank you for having me. I'm Justin Hoagland. I'm a principal at Baker Tilly. And as Corey said, I help run the city side of your audit. Jody Dobson is another principal at Baker Tilly, who runs kind of the utility side of your funds and audits those. And she also does some more of your other proprietary funds, such as the airport, transit, and fiber. But I will hit on those as well briefly tonight. But I know she also presented those financial results, I think, earlier on today to the Utility Commission. But so we did issue your 2023 reports on July 30th. And so after we do that, we always like to, give a brief presentation to the committee, kind of go over the reports that we issued, some of the financial highlights, and then, see if you have any questions for me. So feel free to stop me at any point if you do have questions. First, just wanted to thank, Corey, Matthew, their team, Carrie. The audit went very smoothly. We had a minimal amount of journal entries, far less than the average that we have for municipalities that we audit. And they always do respond very promptly to our questions and requests. So again, it went very smoothly, and thank them for their efforts in this. So now to just kind of go over the couple of different reports that we do issue. The first one that you have on your screen here that hopefully everyone can see, it's the reporting and insights for the 2023 audit. So this document has really a ton of different information in it. It lists any internal control deficiencies that we found as part of the audit. It has my contact information in it. If you ever need to get a hold of me, feel free to contact me at any point throughout the year. If we had any material entries that would need to be in here, we did not have any material entries as part of the audit. And then it has some other required communication that we need to give, those charged with governance, the committee. Next, just wanted to briefly go over, so this is what the financial statements themselves look like. The one thing to note is it's Roman numeral 1 through 3 is our opinion as your auditors on your financial statements. So we do issue what's considered a unmodified or a clean opinion on your financials. So that's all good. and what you've received in the prior years as well. Because, again, everything, like I said, went as planned. It went very smooth. So next, wanted to get into the fun stuff, right? The financial highlights. That is this document. And so turning to page 1 here. So, when I'm assessing the financial health of a municipality, I always like to start with the general fund, right? This is the main operating fund of the city where most of the day-to-day transactions run through. And specifically, I like to look at, the fund balance or the equity that's built up in this fund over the years. So that's what this kind of chart at the top's doing. It's showing, your total fund balance in 2023 compared to 2022. 2022 is black, 2023 is the turquoise. And it breaks it down into different buckets or the types of fund balance, they're defined here at the bottom. I'm just going to go over them briefly. I will say page 52 of the financials breaks these down into far more detail if you want to look at that. But so looking at the bottom here, you have your non-spendable fund balance, this 1.56 million at the end of 2023. And that mostly consists of inventory and prepaids. It's considered non-spendable because it's not in spendable form, right? You've already spent the money on these prepaids or this inventory. So again, it's not really in spendable form. That's why it's in that bucket. Next is your restricted here. Again, there's about $8,000 of restricted. It's restricted if there's an external entity that's restricting it. So I think, typically a lot of that's usually donations where someone donates money and says, hey, this is for this specific purpose. Then it becomes restricted. Then you have your assigned fund balance here. That's 1.97 million. So, municipalities can assign funds for various reasons. A lot of places assign funds for future projects that they know are going to happen and they want to have the money set aside for it. And also unassign those funds later on. But again, it's kind of holding it internally for certain projects. I know a big chunk of this 1.97 million is, there was a certain dollar amount that was in your 2024 budget that you're expecting to use up in your fund balance. And so because you're expecting to use it up next year, it's considered assigned fund balance. And then so what's left over here, this biggest one is your unassigned fund balance. It doesn't have any sort of restrictions or anything like that on it. It's kind of free to use or not to use at the city's discretion. Next, right here in the middle, this is your summarized income statement. Again, super high level budget to actual for the general fund. You'll see that you budgeted here to use up $1.7 million of your general fund balance. However, the actual results were that you only used up about $300,000 of that fund balance. So you actually did about $1.4 million better than budget in the general fund, which is great to see. The main driver here is this. You can see this variance in your revenues being much higher than the budget, your actual revenues. And so $872,000 of that relates to your investment income being, again, $872,000 more than you budgeted. And we're really seeing this at every municipality that we go to. In 2023, rates went up substantially. If you have CDs or just checking and savings accounts, and then the overall market conditions went up. So if you hold any other types of investments, those likely went up as well. So that you did have, again, a huge portion of this relates to that very large investment income for the year. So all good on that front, although it's probably just a one-time kind of bump though this year. So next, again, this page focuses around your general fund balance. And so, one thing we like to kind of calculate is this ratio that says, hey, if you didn't take in any more revenues, how long could kind of the city keep its lights on and keep paying its bills just using that unassigned fund balance that we just talked about. And so for 2023, the city here is in red at 45%, means that you could kind of keep paying the bills for almost half a year, just under half a year. And so the city does have a fund balance policy, which is great. And it kind of says that you want that number to be no more than 6 months, but at least 4 months. So the black line is the 6 months, that light blue line is the minimum. And so you can see you are between and within your fund balance policy for that. The blue dots are other municipalities your size in Wisconsin. And so you can see that you are above kind of where other municipalities are in Wisconsin, which is great to see. You'd much rather have that be above than below. You will see over the last 5 years, it has been slowly trickling down a little bit. And that's just because, really the fund balance has been staying the same. The denominator in this is your budget for the next year, and your budget has been, increasing over the last, 5 years with inflation and everything. So that's why it's kind of been slowly trickling down a little bit. But again, above the average for other municipalities in Wisconsin, and you are within your fund balance policy. So this next page here, what I always like to look at again for assessing the financial health of municipalities, it's debt and how much debt they have outstanding. So what this kind of line chart here at the top's doing is it's comparing your statutory debt limit. So the black line is you're able to take out up to 5% of your equalized value in general obligation debt. So that's kind of what the black line is saying. Here's the max amount of GO debt that you can take out. The red is how much actual GO debt you had outstanding for the last 5 years here. And so essentially you've used up right here about 26% of your debt capacity. I would say this is slightly below the average for municipalities in Wisconsin, and it gives you the ability, to have that kind of capacity of debt to draw on in the future if you do have a large project coming up. So that all looks good here. Going on to the next page here. So this again focuses around your debt. And one, again, kind of ratio we always like to calculate is what percent of your normal routine expenditures do you have to devote to pay off debt service? Because obviously if you have to use it to pay off debt service, then you can't use it to go, buy that truck or, apparently fix a railroad crossing or something. So that's what this is showing. And so at the end of 2023, 20.8%, again, of your normal routine expenses had to go to pay off debt service. The city's been very consistent the last 5 years in that kind of 20 to 22% range. The black dots, again, are other municipalities your size. In Wisconsin, you are mostly below that, or right in kind of range with it. So all good there. Whoop, went too fast. So this next one, we just put this summary together of your TIF districts from a very high level. You do have, I think it's 9 TIF districts active at the end of 2023. So you have a lot of TIF activity going on, which is why we have this on here. It's just pretty much showing the total revenues and expenses over the life of each TIF, kind of where their fund balance is sitting here at the end of the year. We also kind of show when the TIF was created, how long you have to actually incur project costs within the TIFs, and kind of when it needs to close or when your last year to collect increment is. Most of your TIFs are still pretty young in their life. They have a long ways to go. A lot of them go out to 2047 if they need to be. You do have one TIF, TIF 7 is the earliest one, which will close around 2028. And I think we're actually doing the 100% audit for that this year as well, because your expenditure date ended in 2023. But again, the fund balance for a TIF, the life is, a lot of times you start off with a big negative because you're kind of doing a lot of development, and then you're going to get that tax increment revenue later. But still, you know, you don't really have many TIFs, or there's only one that has a negative deficit. And again, it still has the 2047 to collect that increment revenue. So again, there's certainly no concerns about your TIFs possibly being underwater at their end of their lives at this point. So moving on now to the utilities again, I know, you know, Jody Dobson audits these funds, but I just wanted to briefly go over some of the results for them. So starting with the water utility, again, look at the top here, you have your operating results. The green is your operating revenues. Black is your operating expenses. You know, you obviously want the green to be higher than the black. If the black's higher than the green, and it's like that for multiple years, that's when you should really be looking at, you know, do we need to have a rate study done? Are we charging enough for to keep up with our expenses? But in this case, you know, you have a good cushion between the green and the black, so all looks good at that point. We always like to calculate down here your unrestricted reserves. You know, again, how much cash on hand, how many months of cash on hand do you have to kind of, again, keep the lights on? You can see at the end of 2023, that was about 10.10 months, which is great to see, in a very healthy position. Next is this debt coverage ratio. So a lot of your utility debt is revenue debt, and within it there's a debt covenant that says, hey, it's essentially saying, hey, we want to make sure you have 1.1 times next year's debt service payment available to make sure you're going to be able to pay that debt off, right? Because if you miss your debt coverage, some of your documents could say that it could claw back and make you pay off that debt. But you can see, again, the requirement's 1.1 ratio, you're at 3.26, so well above that ratio. So no issues about or concerns about not meeting that debt coverage ratio. At the bottom here, lastly, we have your investment in capital, kind of showing, again, what's equity, what's debt. These are very capital intensive funds, these utility funds, right? And so we like to see, okay, how much of that capital asset is still connected with debt that's outstanding, and how much is equity, meaning it doesn't have debt connected to it. So we usually like to see that at least 50% is equity. And in this case, you have 79% of it is equity, and only 21% of your capital assets in this fund still connected to outstanding debt. The next utility here is the sewer utility. Again, at the top, you have your operating revenues in green, operating expenses in black. You know, they are getting a little closer to each other here the last couple of years. But again, still no concerns. Your unrestricted reserves are about 3 months. You know, that's getting a little lower, especially compared to the 10 months that the water utility is. Usually we like to see at least 3 months. So you are kind of at that threshold. Again, the debt coverage ratio, actual is 1.43. You're required to have 1.25, so you are above that, although it is pretty close. So something to monitor. And equity, again, 58% of your capital is equity backed. So again, over that 50% threshold that we like to see. So all good with that. Next is your stormwater. Again, showing your operating revenues and expenses at the top. The months of cash on hand has been increasing the last 4 years. You're at 11.84 at the end of 2023. Met your debt coverage ratio by a decent margin. And again, 69% of your capital is in equity. So next, going on to the airport, you know, we always like to show, okay, what portion of your revenues are operating revenues and what portion are, you know, backed by the city or other local subsidies. So 65% of your revenues were operating revenues. 35% were either city contributions and or other local subsidies. You looking down at the cash on hand, you're at 3.7 months. It has been decreasing here the last 4 years. I know the airport did have a net loss of about 190,000 in 2023. So again, just something to monitor going forward. Transit. Again, we always like to look at for transit, since there's various funding sources for this program, usually where's the money coming from? So about 28% here is passenger fees. 17% the city and other local subsidies, 10% is the state, and 46% is a federal subsidy. And then, the main thing to talk about on the operating expense side is, the majority of the operating expense relates to salaries and benefits or payroll here. The last one here then, pretty small one, but it's fiber. Again, I think this fund's only been open for about 4 years now. Again, has a very large months of cash on hand, has no debt outstanding, and is still kind of getting off the ground and building those cash reserves and continuing to work on generating revenues. That's really the financial highlights that I wanted to go over. Are there any questions for me?
Any questions on the committee?
Are there more like any concerns that you had?
No, definitely no concerns. Overall, the city's in a pretty good financial position. You're either at or above a lot of the ratios that we calculate. And again, I was on Stevens Point 10 years ago, and now I kind of rotated back on here, and this is my first year on it. And I was very happy with when we came on site and worked through the audit again. That again, Matthew Corey, their team had everything ready for us. It was very smooth. Again, very minimal entries, which is super important, right? Because if we're doing minimal entries, that means that your budget to actual reports are accurate. And you can rely on those where, we have a lot of clients that we work with that need a lot of bookkeeping assistance where we're making material entries and, 70 plus entries. So then it's like, well, can those places really rely on those budget to actual reports that they're getting if we're kind of adjusting everything at year end? But that's not the case here. So again, you're in a really good position, I'd say.
Okay. Any questions from the audience? Okay. Don't hear any. I guess we're ready to move to our next item on the agenda. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very helpful.
Thank you very much, and thanks for letting me do it remotely this year.
The wonders of technology when it works. All right. We have item number 3, update on the 2025 operating budget, the review of budget timelines and establishing related guidelines.
Yes, so the memo is attached. Just a couple of things to hit on briefly. Our net new construction figure was 1.95%, which actually was a little bit better than I was expecting. And then, of course, last year we rolled over our levy limit capacity. So when we combine the 1.95 with the 1.33 that we rolled over from last year, we have a total levy limit of 3.3%. So basically, that's
A magic number.
that is sort of a magic number for us getting into the next item. Because for wage adjustments, the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission always publishes what they believe the rate of inflation is, which is sort of a benchmark that we use. It's also our maximum that we can go for across-the-board wage increases, and that number was 3.3% as well. So that is sort of what we're looking at for wage increases as for January 1st, as far as the overall adjustment to the pay plan, but of course open to any feedback on that. But typically we've tried to follow that WERC number if we can afford it. Then moving on, health insurance looks we did no increase last year. This year, it looks like we are going to have to do an increase. Right now, we're projecting a 10% increase in health insurance premiums, but that's a preliminary estimate. I'm hoping that we can mitigate that down a little bit to maybe 8 or 9%. But at the 10%, that's about a $250,000 impact. So that is significant. Obviously, benefits are a significant expense for the city. Luckily, one of the things that we have going in our favor that can help fund that health insurance increase is the Marshfield Clinic payment in lieu of taxes. That's $190,000. And as I stated in the memo, ideally, because it could go away if the clinic stops operating as a hospital. And if it reverts to a clinic, then that money goes away, and then we have a hole in our budget. So ideally, we would use this for a one-time expense, such as capital, something like that, where then if it goes away, it doesn't really hurt us as much. But unfortunately, I think where we're going to end up with the budget, I think we're going to need to use it in the operating budget.
I have a question.
Sure.
I thought because the big deal was that they said that it was a hospital. If it actually goes back to a clinic, then then it's able to be taxed.
Correct.
And that taxing amount was about $400,000, I thought.
Well, for all jurisdictions, but the other issue that you have with that is, so if it goes back as taxable, we're not going to be able to increase our levy by that amount because our levy limit is only based on net new construction.
Right.
So we would have an increase in tax base, but because there'd be no net new construction to go along with it, we don't get any levy limit flexibility there to collect more in taxes.
So it would just end up being a small tax break for everyone else, but it wouldn't be any additional revenues for us.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And then moving on through the memo, state aid. Some of our state aids do fluctuate from year to year, and we typically get those numbers in September and October, so it's a little too soon to tell where that's all going to shake out. One thing notable this year that's new is that our shared revenue is tied to changes in state sales tax collections. So initially, we were really hoping that, well, if state sales tax collections go up, our shared revenue is going to go up. According to the most recent information that we have, it looks like state sales tax collections have been somewhat flat. So we're not expecting a big increase there as of right now. But of course, we'll see when we get the official numbers from the state. And then moving on, as far as new positions, in terms of budget priorities, we've done it for several years now, where our first priority, sort of job number one, was providing the cost of living adjustment to our employees. And then, if there's anything left over, then we can look at new positions. The last year where we were really able to do something significant in terms of new positions was 2020. So it has been a while since we've really had the funds available to do anything significant with new positions. At this point, I would say it's too soon to tell if there would be money available for new positions, just because we're too early in the process. There's a lot of unknowns yet. But that is something, if you're seeing that differently in terms of how we're prioritizing that, I think that's a good conversation, to have. And then, for the 2025 budget, I would say overall, it looks to be okay. Obviously, it really helped us that we rolled over that levy limit capacity from last year. The Marshfield Clinic payment in lieu of taxes also really helps us. But for 2026, we're not going to have those things. And if we have a net new construction number of 1% to 2%, and we don't have, something else that kind of helps us out significantly, and we're looking to give, 3% cost of living adjustments to our employees. And of course, some of them are in unions, so we don't have a choice. We have negotiations with them where we have to give them a raise. So then you're looking at a potential situation for the 2026 budget. So that's just something, we don't have to figure that out tonight, but that's something that I just wanted to put on the radar screen early, that, long-term, we have this levy limit formula tied to net new construction, which frankly just isn't very sustainable in terms of allowing municipalities to account for inflationary cost increases. So, and then the only other thing I'd note is I did include the budget timeline for both the capital budget and the operating budget. Things will start moving pretty quickly here. Next month, we have the capital budget presentation. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight, especially for the newer alderpersons, is October 28th. We always have the fourth Monday in October. We have a special Finance Committee meeting for proposing the operating budget and making that presentation. So just something to get on your calendars
calendar.
now. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. That'll then get us to item number 4, approval of targets for the 2024 tax year, 2025 payable tax levy.
Yes, so this is kind of picking up a conversation that we had last year about future tax levies and the fact that because of increases in the cost of capital projects, right now, we're borrowing more than what we're repaying in principal. And typically in the past, we've tried to tie those two together. So last year, we looked at plans to bring that back into balance. We looked at going as high as 5.25% as far as annual increases in the tax levy. But the feedback that I got, at least initially from the council, was that's little too high. So ultimately, the most feedback that I got was that a 4.5% increase annually would be most reasonable in terms of our base increase in the tax levy. And that would bring that situation back into balance by 2032. I think that's a reasonable target. And then the other thing to note on the tax levy is, so if we kind of stick with that plan of the 4.5%, note that we also have the fire department referendum as well, which would be on top of that. The fire department referendum, we're looking at an additional 5.2%. So you'd be looking at, if that referendum passes, you'd be looking at a total of 9.7% all day. And as far as what does that work out to on a $100,000 home, that works out to $78 per 100,000. And of that $78 amount, basically $36 would be for that base 4.5% increase, and then $42 would be related to the referendum. And again, that's per 100,000. So, but with the referendum question coming up, we do have to make an estimate on what we're going to do for our tax levy. Because it does affect that referendum question. So I don't know that we're necessarily stuck to that like glue, but we want to be accurate in terms of what we put in the referendum question in terms of a levy increase. So again, apologize for the tight timing on that. The Department of Revenue requirements were a little bit different than what I was expecting for the referendum question, and sometimes they see things kind of their own way, and you just kind of have to roll with it. So that is something that I am looking for feedback on.
So our recommendation last year was the 4.5%. We did go down from the 5.25 originally, which I think was a good move. I do think we need to bring things into balance in a fairly short term. I think the 4.5 still does that. You probably, any questions from the committee first of the comptroller treasurer? Okay. If not, a motion to approve the target of 4.5% would probably be in order, or a different amount if you so desire.
So move for the 4.5%.
Moved by
Morrow.
Alder Morrow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alder Keemer. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed would be no. That passes unanimously. That gets us to item number 5. Our approval of the resolution authorizing a referendum for the City of Stevens Point to hire additional fire department personnel.
Yes, so the resolution is attached, so you can see kind of how that referendum question is preliminarily going to look on the ballot. Just note that we will have an updated resolution after August 15th, based on new information becoming available on August 15th. And as soon as I get that information and then also work out the question with the Department of Revenue and get approval from them on the question, then we will have an updated resolution for you. Probably isn't going to make the council packet on Thursday, though, which I apologize, but it's just the way the timeline has worked out.
Okay, so you still would like an approval of the preliminary resolution without the finalized?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
I think it would be good.
Is there a motion to approve the preliminary resolution as proposed in our packet?
Motion to approve the...
Motion to approve by Broderick. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second by Keemer. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
just have sorry.
Whoa, I didn't see it.
I popped my head in the way.
I just have a small point of clarification.
Sure.
In the memo, it mentions that this resolution has to go to the county by August 27th. Do they have any, approval or denial, or it's
No.
just they receive it?
They need the information.
Okay, gotcha.
To get on the ballot.
Yep.
Very good.
And just another point of clarification, although we won't make the packet, we'll make sure that everybody on council gets it via email, but as soon as we have it,
As soon as
Friday
possible.
perhaps.
Okay, so keep an eye out in your email, and we'll get the exact updated amount. All right, then, all in favor of the motion presented signify by saying aye. Aye. And opposed would be no. That passes as well. Item number 6, approval of the proposal from Ellers Incorporated for a project plan amendment to the tax incremental financing district number 9 to allow the increment to share with TIDs 10, 11, and 12.
Yes, so looking strategically at our TIF districts, TIF District 5 has been really helpful in supporting some of our other TIF districts, especially the newer TIF districts, to sort of get them on their feet as they've had expenses. And what we have to keep in mind is that TIF District 5 has a very large capital project coming up in terms of the Business 51 project on the north side. So it kind of needs to shift its focus in terms of resources to that large capital project. So looking at our other TIF districts, the other TIF district that we have that does really well is TIF District 9, and that is the TIF district on the east side. It's the East Park Commerce Center TIF district. That TIF district does have a cash balance. It's cash flow positive. So looking at basically making this project plan amendment so that we have the option, doesn't mean we have to, but we have the option of sharing increment with TIF districts 10, 11, and 12, which are our newer TIF districts. And think that this will be helpful for the management of the overall financial picture of our TIF districts going forward.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve that, the proposal from Ellers for that project plan amendment for our TIF 9 to be able to share with the other TIFs, 10, 11, and 12?
So moved.
Moved by Alder Schuda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Morrow. Discussion?
Point of clarification.
Alder Broderick, sure.
So the memo, it mentions that we're excluding 6 and 13 from this. Is there any value in allowing ourselves that possibility for later? Is it better to be as restrictive as possible with this language? I guess, wondering if it makes more sense to just add those two if we're adding the other 3.
To throw them in anyway. We could add them anyway. I don't see a lot of need with TIF 13 especially. And with TIF 6 is doing a little bit better. And, they're TIF 6 is also supported by TIF District 7, so they've got a different TIF district that's supporting it. But certainly, we could, options are always good to have. So, I certainly see that perspective. I don't know if Director Karnowski has other thoughts on it.
You could definitely do that. I tend to agree with the comptroller, though. TIF 13, which is former Walmart, now Denham's, that whole area. We established a TIF, and then we had this pretty substantial redevelopment of that site with Hobby Lobby and some of the other strip mall activities in the redevelopment. So we've also been very careful not to actually incentivize any of that development, because strip retail is not necessarily within our wheelhouse of what we want to incentivize. I don't foresee that changing too drastically, that type of land use out there in the near future. And that TIF is relatively small. I think it's 8 or 9 total parcels, and it's really just that strip mall redevelopment area. So you could include it, but not necessarily required by any means.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Alder-Kamer.
In the future event that like a TIF 14 or 15 is created, is there an ability to allow this increment sharing at the time of the TIF's creation, or do you always have to come in after the fact and make an amendment of this sort?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Do you?
My understanding is that you have to wait until it's been created,
Okay.
and you can't automatically expect to share.
Okay.
Obviously, when you set up a TIF, especially younger TIFs tend to be underwater for the first typically decade of their lives. And so that's when you see that 2, 3, 4 years after they've been created, that sharing. And so, obviously TIF 14 is in the pipeline. That'll be coming before this body in the next several weeks, but we don't expect the need to have any of that sharing quite yet. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, all those in favor of the proposal could signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed would be no. That passes unanimously. Brings us to number 7, approval of the acquisition of 2517 Price Street. Price, bordering Gerke Park.
I think
Is there a motion to approve?
Was that through-
A presentation first. We can, Director Kramer, would you like to enlighten us?
I sure can. There's a memo in the packet. Essentially, this is a continuation of the comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. So a property was put up for sale adjoining Gerke Park here on the north, and the negotiation, landed where the purchase agreement, which is in the packet. So the purchase price that was agreed upon or is up for consideration here is, and contingent on approval from Finance and Council, is under assessed value, but includes some rent within that until the tenant does decide to leave the country, essentially, here before the end of the year. And the plan would be just basically short-term foreseeable future as rental, but long-term as the continued demand for the park is increasing. This is kind of our central park here in Stevens Point. At the time when the City Council should choose to, and the Park Commission look at a reconfiguration of the park, that could happen. Same thing, it's obviously an asset. So if something else changed down the road, it also has a marketable value to it too. So based on Park Commission's review and the city staff, we recommend approval. And for now, it would just be rental into the foreseeable future.
Okay. Any questions?
Just one quick comment, because
Sure.
again, the senior staff at the police department is in Green Bay. This also could be used as an additional egress to the police department, should the buildup at the back part of the lot not allow them to go out through by PJ's.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I can mention, I get into the amenities, but essentially things that are on the docket here coming down the road. So the pool that we have that was built in the late 50s and early 60s is coming due for basically long-term planning, whether that's going to be an aquatic facility or it's going to be a splash pad feature or whatever we would choose to do, which Park Commission and certainly the Council Finance Committee will be a part of. If that happens, the footprint's going to change. So as you look at kind of the green space that's behind the houses that are called for potential acquisition, that whole area could be relayed out. Additionally, with the planned PD forestry garage and the relocation of the offices, it's going to put a heavier demand here on this kind of northwest corner. And then as you start looking at egress routes, if we would ever put another turf field or improve some sort of, something with the KB Willett Arena or another sort of outdoor amenity here, that's where we're kind of getting to a point where we're just out of space. So we do have long-term obligations with the contracts, if you remember, to the school district, so they'll always have their recreational amenities and their FIAD classes here. So essentially, we get to a point where if we want it contiguous, this is the only remaining property left. And that's why that really became part of the plan, going back even in the early 2000s. And this is kind of the first one that came up where we had an option added.
Okay.
I will move approval of the acquisition of 2517 Price Street.
We have a motion by Alder Keemer. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Alder Broderick. Any other comments? All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed would be no. It's approved unanimously. We have finally our approval of claims paid, which is the one that always boggles me. Any of them that you want to point out for us?
Sure. So we've got several large capital projects that we paid some pretty significant bills for. And then the only other one to point out is we did make the second development incentive payment for the Hilton Home to Suites Hotel, so for $500,000. So that project has reached completion, and so we've made the final payment.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve claims paid as submitted?
Motion to approve claims paid.
Motion by Alder Morrow. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Alder Broderick seconds that.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? All in favor of approving the claims paid signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed would be no. We're adjourned at, what do we got?
7:31.
7:31.